The race for governor is in full swing as candidates are pushing to get their names and messages out and win the support of voters across the state. Today, I'm sitting down with State Senator Josh Kimbrell, who is routinely at the bottom of the polls, but he says that is about to change, and he may be right. I'm Nick Reagan, and this is We The Palmetto. We talked to Lowcountry voters. Trump was in true campaign form. Voting is officially underway. Joe Biden spoke here in the heart of downtown.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This episode was recorded on Tuesday ahead of the second SCGOP debate. If you want to join the conversation, make sure you're sending me an email at wcscpolitics@live5news.com. I would love to hear from you. All right, I got State Senator Josh Kimbrell with me now. Let's start off with, you guys come in here, you drop some news right before you get here. I'm totally unprepared now, but you just introduced a new bill. Tell me about it.
So we introduced a bill today to basically ensure that both major political parties are disclosing kind of how the money's spent, putting the chairs of both parties under the state economic interest laws that every legislator has to file. Just because I feel that we're going to have every member of the House and the Senate disclose everything that they receive an income from which sources. There's reasons for that, just to be sure everything's copacetic. And we want to be sure that we have the same kind of transparency going forward, so there's faith from the public in the integrity of both parties.
In a state that's dominated by the Republican Party, this sounds like a direct constraint on GOP leadership that you're not directly a part of the leadership, but part of the party of.
Well, look, I think it is a Republican-dominated state, but it's not targeted at any one person. The bill applies to both parties and any major party that may emerge at some point in the future. So the idea is just transparency across the board, because political parties are essentially lobbyists, and that's okay. We have lobbyists for any number of subjects, but we need those parties to be fully clear and transparent, just like legislators would, as to what the motivations are, where they're getting funding from, and where there might be potential pitfalls or conflicts. So no, it's not targeted anybody, but it is targeted at full transparency in politics in our state.
Well, we've seen a division between what the party wants and what some of the legislators of that same party want, and sometimes they clash. Do you think something like this will get the nod of approval from everyone?
We have 14 sponsors of it today. I was the primary, and we have 13 co-sponsors from across the spectrum in the Senate. So yeah, I think we have a good chance of trying to advance it. It's late in the session, I acknowledge that, but having 14 members of the Senate co-sponsor any piece of legislation is a big deal, and I think that shows a groundswell of support that people will be, I think we're going to get it passed, if not this year, certainly next year.
Okay, so that maybe could get done. Let's talk about something that probably isn't going to get done today, and this is being recorded on Tuesday. You guys passed out of the Senate subcommittee the latest abortion bill. I think this one is the Unborn Child Protection Act.
I believe that's what it's called.
Something like that.
That's what it's called.
You've already expressed that this probably isn't going to get across the finish line this session. Is that right?
I don't see that there's time for that to happen. When the budget's on the floor this week, we've got to try to tie up loose ends the next couple of weeks. We're in late April. We're down to just a couple of weeks of session. So I'd be really surprised that we would have the time to take it up. Yeah.
And this is a more restrictive abortion ban than what we already have, which is effectively the 6-week ban.
Yeah,
right?
And I was a big supporter of the heartbeat bill. I was an early co-sponsor of that and worked hard to get that compromise done, not once but twice. We had to pass it once. Then the state Supreme Court struck it down under the prior Chief Justice, and then we made some tweaks and changes and got it adopted and put into a law after that. But look, I think it's okay to have the discussion, and my attitude was have the debate, let the committee have its will and send it to the floor. But I think there'd be a lot of amendments to it before the final product would be passed. But I just don't think that'll happen this year. The calendar just does not allow the time for it.
I have two questions on this bill, and I know that we already admit that it probably isn't going to get passed this year, but it is something that continues to be brought up every year. That there is a legislature. The first one is, this bill would be a near total abortion ban. I think it's something like you can detect a pregnancy after like 4 days or something like that, but it's basically a near total abortion ban. I just wonder if you think that the state would need to commit more resources to basically care for any children that are born and potentially abandoned because they're forced to have a child.
Well, more broadly, I've always supported adoption reform to make it easier for adoptions to happen at a less expensive cost to the average South Carolina family. Right now, it's prohibitively expensive to have adoptions, so I've always supported increasing funding to basically make adoptions cheaper for people who want to adopt kids. I do think there's a discussion you'd have to have overall about providing for children, but I think that's the responsibility of any state to do it. Now, in terms of the final product of that bill, I'm not comfortable without providing exceptions on rape and incest, life of the mother. So those kind of things are going to have to be debated if and when this ever goes to the floor. I don't think it'll happen this year, and I think we'll have to have that conversation in the future. But more broadly, I've always supported additional resources for adoption and childcare.
Yeah, that was the other thing that I was interested about is that doctor component. I think, and I don't know what the latest version of the bill is, so excuse me, but I believe that there was a punishment clause for doctors, medical providers that perform abortions.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if a state that already struggles to have enough doctors to care for everybody can afford something like that.
Well, I think right now, if you look at the penalties that are in it, I'm uncomfortable with the penalty structure.
Okay.
I think it's too harsh. I mean, like I said, I supported allowing the debate to proceed, but that doesn't mean I support, if you listen to the speech I gave in the committee, I said, look, I'll let the bill proceed, but I have some serious concerns and heartburn over the penalty structure, 20 years in certain cases for doctors. Now, look, if I think if a doctor openly violates protections for children in the law, there should be some consequences. 20 years to me, I'm not comfortable with that structure. I agree with you that right now we have a physician shortage generally, and you don't want it to be to where in cases that are not anything to do with abortion, like a miscarriage or a D&C, that somebody's going to be potentially prosecuted under that and feel that they can't provide proper care. So there's a lot of things that would have to be debated, worked out, and dealt with on the floor if we get to that point at any point in the future. I don't think it'll happen this year, but when it does happen, there'll be a long discussion.
When the issue comes back up again,
it'll be a long discussion. Yeah.
All right, I want to change things up here for just a moment because let's go ahead and just assume you win the race for governor,
Sure.
and you win a second term as well. What does the state look like after 8 years of your administration?
I would hope at the end of the first 4 years we would have no income tax. I mean, I'm the only candidate that's actually ever introduced a bill in the South Carolina legislature to do that. Everybody seems to agree we need to get rid of it, but most people have a plan that's kind of a little more vague or just kind of, hey, yeah, I want to get to zero. I introduced a bill in 2022 that would get us to zero, not in 4 years, not in 5 years, but in 13 months. I stand by that. I'd push for that again as governor, and I believe it can absolutely be done. So at the end of 4 years, I'd like to see that income tax is gone. I'd like to have even higher exemptions for personal residents on property tax, where in retirement years, you're not losing your home over a property tax bill. And I think at the end of it, those first 4 years, I'd like to see significant regulatory reform. I'm working really hard on that right now. So I want to be a freer state, a less taxed state, and people feel that they have more freedom in South Carolina.
Okay, so the biggest thing that people talk about, and I think I saw some data just this week about the top issues in South Carolina, of course, is roads and infrastructure. Yep. If we get rid of income tax, we still need money for roads and infrastructure. What's your plan to fix the roads, and how do you pay for it if, again, we knock down income tax to zero?
So Senate Bill 801 is a bill that I co-sponsored this year. That would be largely the framework I would push as governor as well. So modernization bill. And for starters, by the way, if you get rid of the income tax under the plan I proposed, it's revenue neutral or maybe revenue positive because you deal with sales tax exemptions on these loopholes in the sales tax code. So you're not going to gut the budget. This idea that if we pass a zero income tax, we can't fund roads, that's just not true. It's not an either or, it's a both and. The way I've proposed it, you got 14.5 million tourists that come to this state any given year, maybe more than that. And you got a lot of folks, if you close the loopholes on sales taxes, then you're going to be able to more than plug the budget hole that might happen from income tax, but then you're rewarding the people who live here and making it easier for them to raise a family, run a business, run a small business. And then in terms of modernization of DOT, I want to decouple us from the feds. We're no longer waiting on the federal government to approve any site selection or any project we're going to do. That's a huge cost increaser because you're basically going through all these engineering drawings and plans and revisions. If we let the state approve its own plans under this bill, then that makes it cheaper to get more miles of road. And then we'd allow private contractors to come in and build additional lanes like you have in Florida or Georgia or Texas, to where we can add lanes to 26 or 85, 95, and it's optional. People aren't forced to have a toll road, and people say, oh gosh, don't make them all toll roads. We wouldn't make the 3 or 4 lanes that exist now toll lanes.
Sure.
But you could add a lane that you could buy a Palmetto Pass. I'm sure we'll call it Palmetto Pass.
There you go.
I'm sure we'd call it that. So I think you allow people to have that option and let private contractors come in and build additional lanes, and it's not going to cost taxpayers any more money. You take pressure off the other 3 lanes. So even the folks that don't want to use the toll lane. That's fine. I'd buy it because I'd like to avoid the traffic. But it's going to move a lot of us who are willing to buy the Palmetto Pass into a toll lane, take pressure off the other three, and it makes everybody's life better.
See, you brought up Florida and whatnot, and I immediately thought, sounds like toll roads to me. So it sounds
only
like it's
one
part
lane.
of the plan.
Only one lane of it, yeah.
But obviously it's all optional. Okay, well, we have to talk about the bad for just a moment because
Sure.
this comes up. You recently got into a situation with some firefighters and with Exodus and
Let's
everything.
not use plural.
A firefighter, and it spenned off at least one lawsuit, a second lawsuit with Exodus. Can you just touch on the whole situation? Let's just get this out of the way.
Well, no, I filed the lawsuit for defamation. It
Okay.
was my campaign that did it. So the lawsuit was us suing for defamatory situations there. Look, this entire episode is part of an ongoing lawfare against me that's been going on since, frankly, 9 days after I announced for governor. And it's completely politically motivated. My lawyers have laid it out very clearly in the pleadings. I stand by what they've said, and I think that I think it'll be proven to everybody that this has all been a huge distraction, and frankly, some folks behaving badly. And it's not me that's behaving badly. I think that's going to be very clear in the end. This was a lawfare attempt by a few folks that had a plan from basically the beginning of my campaign.
I think that you had put out a statement earlier that basically admitted that maybe I shouldn't have said some things on social media. Is that right?
Well, I said to one, so let's talk about the one particular you call him fire. He's not.
Yes.
This guy's not a full-time firefighter. That's not his primary occupation. He has run around the community quite extensively, trashing my family, my wife, and I fired at him on social media. I probably shouldn't have done that part, but I still think what he's done is wrong. And I think that what he's done to my family is egregious. And, as a husband and father, I'm a human being who will respond at some point.
All right. Well, we'll leave it at that on that particular topic. You have introduced, at least on your website, this idea of an Office of Parental Rights. What is this about?
Yeah, I think, but you go back to after COVID, a lot of people got really concerned about, frankly, intrusions on their parental decision-making, and particularly schools. And one of the things we saw recently has been kind of a big blow up in Spartanburg County. You probably haven't heard about this down here. Maybe you have. To where one school district allegedly, and I don't know all the facts yet, but I've talked to the family, and so essentially had a child in middle school, I believe, and there was an effort to transition this kid, and nobody told his parents, and he's being given all kinds of counseling and even up to trying to prescribe drugs to him without mom and dad knowing about it. That's wrong. No parent should have a guidance counselor or anybody at a school making decisions for their child that they don't even know about. So I have said that we would put together sort of like an ombudsman for parental rights to say that if you feel your rights have been violated as a parent by a school district or the health department, that you could file that with the governor's office of parental rights, and we'd look into it. I think parents deserve some advocacy and shouldn't feel that they're essentially railroaded by agencies of government.
Okay, you also have suggested, this is a portion of your website, which nobody seems to be talking about. You want to modernize the DMV.
Yeah.
What's the deal with the DMV? What do you got?
I think most people recognize that we use technology systems in South Carolina right now that were designed in like the 80s or 90s, okay? Yep. And so everybody kind of looks at government and says the DMV is a good example, not just here, every state, okay?
Right.
That when you go and you stand in this little queue, you take a little number, and you have to go to a DMV office to renew your driver's license. There's some states you can do that at Publix. Okay, they have kiosks, you go type it in, renew it on the spot. It's done really easily, really efficiently, less of a footprint from government workers and faster for the general public. I'd like to see that done. I'd like to see us implement some new technology, make it a lot faster to get your driver's license renewed or an application in place as opposed to what it is right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody likes the DMV, and I will say, I think
that's probably fair.
Just about all of the systems in South Carolina probably need a 10 to 15 year update.
Yeah, we're a little behind on the tech stuff.
Yeah, we could use a little bit of help there. All right, before I sort of get to your closing here, I don't know if you'll answer this, but we'll give it a shot anyways. What would you say?
Prompted that way?
I know. I like to give you an out just in case, but I'm hoping you'll find something here. What would you say is your most liberal position?
Most liberal position. I mean, I don't know if I define it as liberal. I think it's consistent with my overall philosophy. I think both parties on something like the death penalty tend to be fairly drawn to one corner or the other. And so a lot of folks in my party voice, all right, hang them high, hang them now. And then the Democratic Party has mostly moved toward we don't want any death penalty at all. I feel that the way we implement the death penalty in South Carolina is wrong. Frankly, I think it's been it's actually skewed against people who are poor and lower, and oftentimes minorities. I mean, if you look at some of the egregious crimes that have been committed, even the Murdoch trial, and that went down. If you're really wealthy and can afford a good lawyer, you're probably not going to end up on death row. If you don't have that kind of money, you might. And I think it's unequally applied. So I would probably be the first governor in South Carolina history that would commute a death sentence under the right circumstances.
Wow, you actually took like a hard stance. I can appreciate that.
I have guts, man. I'll answer.
I thought the easy out would be just to say something about dogs or something. We love dogs, and
I like dogs, dude.
Perfect. But death battle, dude, didn't see that coming. All right, finally here, you're down in the polls. We'll just be candid here. If you trust the polls, that is. And it seems like from most talking points, you're sort of a long shot candidate. What helps you stand out? How do you stand out? How do you get back against these candidates?
Well, debates.
Winning?
I mean, look, I haven't seen any polls that are statewide conducted that have been released since the first debate that we had. We saw a huge surge in traffic, a huge surge in coverage, a huge surge in interest on our campaign after that first debate. I fully intend to replicate that in the debate we're going to have here in Charleston today. And I think when people, it says people can buy $1 million of TV ads if you want, but if you don't have a message to go with it, that means something. And I think if you look at overall where I stand, I think once we get some polls from the debate era here, it's going to change fairly dramatically. I'd also point out that Governor Haley was trailing in the polls in 2010. She became the governor, and she was running about the same against an attorney general, against a congressperson. So I think it's, and a lieutenant governor, almost the same dynamic. I feel like what we have presented to the debates and what we've talked about at every forum we've all been at together, I'm actually have done these things. It's not theoretical for me. And I believe what stands out is I'm the only person in the entire race right now that's ever passed a bill in the South Carolina legislature that has any meaning on everyday citizens' lives. I
will say you were the first person to speak at the first debate, and you came out strong, and I thought that you had a strong performance. It showed that you have been in front of a microphone many times, and you know what you're doing given your career. So, I think you're probably right. I think the debates are a great way for someone to rise quickly in the polls, and I would like to see. It's almost suspicious that we haven't seen a lot of polls released.
I don't think anybody wants to see those polls released because it's going to change the race.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, what's your final message to voters?
Look, every single issue people care about in this race, whether it's the roads and bridges, as you mentioned, tax cuts, protecting your private property rights, I'm the only person in the race that's ever passed any of that stuff in the legislature. I mean, I look at we got 2 members of Congress running, a lieutenant governor, the attorney general, and a businessman, all of whom I appreciate them putting themselves into the race. They're good folks. But at the end of the day, you've got to say, this is not only what I will do, but what I have done. This is a legislatively dominant state. Unless you can pass meaningful legislation, I think you're going to be an ineffective governor. And I've passed meaningful legislation on all those issues as either the primary sponsor or a major co-sponsor. I think I might be the only senator in South Carolina history, at least, who in his first term passed a constitutional amendment to prohibit illegal citizens from voting in our state. So I've done really consequential, meaningful things that you can look at the record and say, here's what he actually did, not just what I will talk about doing, and I will build on that record of success.
All right. Should we refer to you as the Nikki Haley candidate?
Probably not.
All right, I didn't think so. All right, State Senator Josh Kimbrell, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Good to be
it.
with you. Thanks.
That's going to be it for this episode of We the Palmetto. Next episode, we've got Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evett in studio with me. Make sure you are staying subscribed anywhere you get your podcasts so that you get notified just as soon as that drops. And if you want to watch the video versions of this podcast, all previous podcasts, and of course all future podcasts, you can head over to the Live 5 streaming service on apps like Roku, Fire TV, Apple TV. Just search for Live 5 Plus. All right, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you in the next episode.